there that that saying that police officers are not heroes. I watched the video and I just kind of want to talk about that. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what motivated me to make that video was just the current state in policing, and I think the perspective that both police officers and civilians have on it. I think how we from both those sides perceive police officers is important, as it will ultimately determine how we act as a police officer. So specifically, usually you get the two sides. There's people that are indifferent, but right, the two large opposing sides are going to be cops, fighting for cops. Like, hey, I'm a cop's cop. I'm out here doing God's work. I'm serving, sacrificing, serve and protect, right? It's seen as like a holy grail of things you could possibly do as a human, right? It's almost looked as very righteous and moral. It's almost looked as a very righteous and moral above, above standard human thing to do. So I think that can be dangerous for police officers when you view yourself that way, or allow others to change the way you think of yourself because of how they talk about you, whether good and or bad.
It makes sense. Get that superiority complex, or
Sure.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what do you like? What I know there's probably we'll kind of go down a rabbit hole here, but like what problems do you see with like training when it comes to police officers?
I would say regarding training, the biggest deficit you're going to see is a lack of use of force, hands-on training, specifically not incorporating proper and effective methodologies, that being grappling, right? Like obviously as police officers, there's things that are applicable that you would have to change regarding how you incorporate the grappling, that being Brazilian jiu-jitsu, wrestling, judo, all those things have a place, right? But largely it's just not incorporating those at all at the department level, at the academy level. So in service as a current police officer, and then also at the academy level when you're trained to be a police officer. You don't see continual training. If you do, it's 2 to 4 hours of continual training a year.
A year?
At most. We don't have any. So at the city department, no continual training for defensive tactics. I've been on 6 years total, and I think there was one class we did for an hour of the 6 years for continual training.
oh shit,
For combatives, and it was how to put handcuffs on and take them off.
Dude.
So it's wild, man.
that's nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like, would you say like the average blue belt in jiu-jitsu is like way more trained than the average cop?
Yeah, I mean, easily, because the average cop is just that, an average human. They're
Yeah.
pulling from a demographic of people, it's just a subset of the average population, which is the average person's untrained. So a blue belt being moderately trained, 2 to 3 years
Yeah.
on average to get a blue belt, yeah, they're far superior to any cop that you're going to see, the vast majority of them.
Yeah, I remember watching a podcast on Jocko Willing's show, and he was like, it should be mandatory that police have jujitsu training. And he said that would be that was one of the things that he was saying, that if he became president, that he would implement.
Yeah, I think he has a great outlook regarding like police. If you want the way that police are looked at and how we, the society, want them to do the job, really they should be treated like operators in a sense. Operators like being, your teams guys, SEALs, beret, et cetera, where they're constantly training. The majority of,
I think you said like 20% of the time they spend training or something.
right, and I would even say easily that, like if we're working 40-hour work weeks, easily 8 to 10 hours. That 25% should be
training. You and
training.
I'm spending at least 8 hours in the gym. For
Yes.
Sure.
And I
I
think
know you're probably spending more than that, but
yeah, I try. I think more than just making jiu-jitsu mandatory, this is like where Effective Fitness Combatives, why I started working for them, is their methodology just got me hooked. It's wrestling jiu-jitsu based, which is my background, but also it's the way in which they're implementing it, right? So it's beyond just mandating jiu-jitsu and grappling. It's how you're using that within the realm, the domain of policing, right? Because there's certain things we can and cannot do, certain things you shouldn't do. And certain, they're not necessarily, as you would imagine, not all things are applicable within jiu-jitsu, the sport of jiu-jitsu, or recreationally within law enforcement. So you have to kind of gear that specifically for law enforcement, right? Modify those things and account for things like, hey, I got a gun on my belt. I'm going to be operating on surfaces that aren't mats, right?
Sure.
Et cetera, et cetera. So that's a great thing. Like with EFC, how we're, Jay and them are doing a great job of modifying those techniques, pressure testing them in real life scenarios, and modifying them to make them ideal for police.
So now EFC, let's go into kind of what exactly is that? Is that something that you kind of do on the side? If you're a police officer, this is like an additional training that you can kind of sign up for, or like how does all that work?
So EFC, I'm currently like an instructor form. We have, some guys that work, they're all active law enforcement, proud law enforcement. We go to seminars and we instruct other law enforcement officers. Ideally, it's like instructors. So it's the course is meant to instruct the instructor. So you're teaching people how to teach people.
Sure.
But we get guys that are just cops on the street that are just going for a refresher, or ideally a new methodology on how they can incorporate proper tactics in the street. But our goal target is going to be defensive tactics instructors throughout other departments and guys that want to be those, right? Or just a SME for the department that wants to better be able to implement proper protocol within the department or make changes, right? So we have a methodology that's post-certified in most states. The goal is to teach people on that methodology so they can go back and hopefully teach their academy recruits and in-service cops, but also adopt that curriculum at the academy level and service level so that we can reference that curriculum as our basis for what we teach, as opposed to just, using whatever sort of PPCT, pressure point, bullshit, Aikido, wrist locks that like St. Louis City has. We're showing Steven Seagal wrist locks to subdue people and get hands behind their back, which is fucking wild.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a St. Louis City police officer, and we were this was like out. It was actually at a bachelor party, and I remember we were talking about like, it's like, man, I have talking to me because I'm the only one there that trains, and we was like, hey man, I have a really hard time like when the guy's like laying on his stomach, hiding his hands. I can't get his hands behind his back, and I just kind of. He's like, what would you do to get someone's hands free? And I was like, well, you get inside control, get his elbows away from his body, pulls, get his wrist, control his hands, get his hands behind his back. I mean, I was like, I don't know if that's right, but that's what I would do if I wanted to get someone's hands behind his back. And I was just like flabbergasted that he like didn't know how to do that as a police officer who'd been, he's been a police officer for a number of years at the time. And I was like, man, like that kind of really opened my eyes to like how little training that police officers actually get when in combatives and just how to control a human body.
Not just that, but how in shape they are.
Yeah.
I've got some buddies that are police officers, and I'm like, boys, how are you supposed to run somebody down?
Yeah. The combative thing is, that's one thing. Cause it's like, okay, maybe you could, blame it on the fact that your department doesn't offer training, or you don't know that training exists, right? That you're just unaware of or you just don't know what proper training is. Like if you've never fought, you've never been in an MMA fight, you've never grappled, then you don't necessarily know what's the most optimal way to control a human. You've never wrestled, right? You're not aware that those things exist, which is why you see these shitty methodologies within police, because, guys that do Aikido, guys that are using these less than ideal methods aren't actually fighting humans. They're not pressure tested, which is why they go through life unaware of the deficiencies of their methodology. But with fitness, it's like, hey man, you just do work, and you'll get fitter. Like you don't have to really there's ideal ways to do fitness, but it's like, just go run, bro. You're not going to be setting a world record with a mile PR if you're just going out doing random shit, but you're going to be above average fit if you're just compiling work.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, so if you had to start, if they said, hey Matt, you're in charge of how we do training here. What's the first thing you would implement in the academy?
Oh, fuck. Man.
Would you say hey, you got to get a blue belt, or you got to train X amount of year, or what would be?
If I'm in charge of who's getting hired or how they're being trained?
Both.
So I guess the first step, right, would be how we hire people. So looking at it from that perspective, I mean, realistically, if we're being realistic, we already have a shortage of police officers, right? So which is why that's why we see the problems we do, right? Because the kinds of people they're hiring, it's not just the lack of training, but it's their inability to want to train, and the kinds of people that are being drawn to policing, that's a whole nother argument, right? Okay, you could say it's money, blah, 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 blah. So assuming an ideal world where, getting a sufficient population of people to want to be police officers and, money, all those things, all those variables aren't necessarily part of the equation. I would say the ideal person I want to hire is someone that is, they should have a foundation in training, but if they don't, I don't necessarily think it should be a requirement. I don't necessarily think that prior training should be a requirement, but if that's the case, then we need to implement a structure, a methodology within the academy where we're training people up to standard, which is not being done. So if you, a 6-month academy is pretty long, but like we don't, dude, I didn't learn shit. Like you could have put me on the street before I did that academy and I would have known essentially, I mean, with some minor, without the law, without, the law classes, there'd have been no difference. Like I could have taken 1 week worth of law classes and that would have sufficed. That would have sufficed,
Really?
at least for me, right? Because I went in with a high level of training.
You have a high level. You're not the average human. That's for sure.
But to be honest, like, I mean, some of those guys lost weight and they gained some fitness. That's the only thing the academy I would say did for some people. But in terms of like actually being able to operate as a police officer, there was it wasn't sufficient and it just wasn't useful. So with that being said, I would say, I don't think you need a background in, like, I would ideally be looking for those people that have backgrounds in combatives related sports, right? Wrestling is number one, man.
Sure,
if they wrestled, I want you.
Get them to the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's still not sufficient, right? Wrestling in and of itself isn't sufficient. So ultimately it comes down to, I would hire people that have a level of intelligence and open-mindedness and willingness to train. So if you're a lazy piece of shit, I don't want you. If you're stupid, I don't want you. I mean, that's just, you can't change stupid and you can't change lazy in my mind. So those are the two things that I want. I want people that are willing to work hard and that are at least of average intelligence, because that's probably going to lead to people who are more open-minded and then willing to train and willing to do the things necessary to become a good police officer. Then that would take us to the academy level. How would I?
Yeah. What would be the first, thing you'd change or implement if you could?
At the academy level, I would say, and there's a lot of things I would change. Regarding defensive tactics, which one I would not call it defensive tactics. This is a big thing UFC's on, which I agree with. It's like, it's combatives, man. Like we have to be in defensive tactics. It's in the name. It's pretty misleading, right? Like we want to give the impression that we're being defensive, that it's a counter-offensive or defensive measure. But like sometimes as police officers, we want to be offensive.
Of course.
So one, I would change the name from defensive tactics to combatives or some sort of other.
Yeah, but I mean the public persona doesn't sound so good. Yeah, I get it.
A lot of it's just public perception, man. The way but that's also important because we need to start changing the way the public perceives things. So, and that starts with changing, like just accepting that we have to be offensive. So with that being said, I would change defensive tactics to ideally EFC's methodology. I work for them for a reason, because I believe their methodology is the best. So I would incorporate a methodology where you are learning wrestling and jiu-jitsu and that it's geared specifically for law enforcement in real life situations. I would probably mandate something like, I would have them train every day, man.
Really?
Every day they should be training.
That's how you start your day. You got to go in and take a jiu-jitsu class, or a wrestling class. That's the first thing you do. You shower up, then get out on the street.
2 hours of combatives every day, 5 days a week. I would mandate it for 6 months. That would be a solid base.
For sure.
And the people that didn't want to do it, guess what?
See ya.
They quit. Good. We don't want those people anyway. There's going to be the same people that quit on the street, that are liabilities, that probably are committing illegal things or using excessive force, right? Because they're either weak-minded people or they're scared, and you see the people where the cops freak out and they maybe do something they shouldn't have done, whether it be excessive force through firearm when they could have controlled that subject, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? We don't want those people. If they quit, good. We don't want those anyway. And then the ones that are capable grow into more efficient police officers, and they leave with a better understanding on how to police, specifically through use of force.
How many people right now that you're currently working with feel the same way as you?
Not many, man.
Really?
Not many. And that's evident because, I have gotten quite a few city coppers to start training. Like Revive has.
Yeah. I say they got the Adopt a Cop thing, right? Don't they?
We work with Adopt a Cop, yeah, but we had a couple guys on that program, but we have.
That's kind of funny.
10
jiu-jitsu, just bringing in adopting.
Well, it's the whole program. I think it like basically pays for their training up to blue belt or something.
Awesome.
Yeah, up to blue belt gives. The idea is, like, I think $100 is what Adopt a Cop gives. So ideally, that you're as an affiliate of Adopt a Cop, you pay for the remainder of that membership.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
We have like 10, 12 coppers at Revive, and I think Watson's over in the city has some coppers. So
not a lot though.
No,
and I'm like shocked because I always remember the story that stuck out to me, and it really kind of opened my eyes to like how little training police officers get. I said the one story about my one buddy, but I remember when I was training at a different gym than Watson's, I remember there was a guy that came in. It was like his first day in jiu-jitsu. And I was talking to him before the class, and he was telling me how he's a SWAT guy. And I was like, oh, damn, this guy's going to be tough. And then like I was like a 6 month into training, and I was able to like throw him around, submit him several times, and and I was 6 months into training. I had 3 years of wrestling experience in high school, so I mean I wasn't brand new, but I was like, wow, I was able to like throw around the SWAT guy and sub him several times, and I was like, dude, that like really opened my eyes to how little training police officers have. Holy shit! Like this guy kind of like was like kind of trying to like flex on me and tell me how tough he was because he was like part of the SWAT team, and I was like, oh, but then we you kind of know quickly like when you grab someone like how much training they have, and you're like, okay, well this is it really opened my eyes to it. So
You couldn't have said it better, man. The SWAT guys are just like, I mean, there's some great SWAT operators, but in terms of how they work within the realm of CQB and all that, okay, whatever. But with all that side, just like street policing, use of force, how to like control somebody, the vast majority of them are just the biggest bros of policing that became SWAT operators and
really,
just rely on size, mass, and or
this guy was way bigger than me too, and I'm not a big guy, and I'm like, I'm $160, at the time I was probably $160, $165, 5'7", and this guy was over 6 foot, I don't know what he weighed, probably close to 200 plus, and I was able to, throw him around, and I was like, holy shit.
They have an image to protect. So sometimes the SWAT guys, it's just like, you get a Green Beret or a SEAL, you get trained with some guy that has like high level military training, they got an image to protect, man. They don't, because people see him as like superheroes, but it's like, hey, you guys are well trained within the areas you're well trained in. That doesn't mean you know how to fight or control a human. That's not how they're trained.
Oh yeah, I'm sure if we, got out on a gun range, he would shoot way better than me
Right.
or whatever, but like in a hand-to-hand situation, I felt pretty confident there.
Yep.
So, I'm not trying to like brag or anything, but I was like, holy shit, it's
the reality world. And that's what's more scarier is not only their delusion, but the delusion of the public thinking that these guys who are getting special military, special police training, that they're somehow more qualified to do the job. I mean, within a certain capacity, yes, but not when it comes to controlling a human. They're not getting specialized training on that. It's not happening.
So, if you had to give it a percent, what percent of like the St. Louis City police officers like trained?
I think I did this math a few months ago. I think it's less than 10. And we're supposed to have like 1,200 cops, but we probably have, who knows, 800. Dude, it's less. So what, less than 1%?
Dude.
It's about 1% or less of cops that train. I mean, it's fucking.
That's sad.
And what's crazier is that almost all those guys are buddies of mine. So they've trained as a result of my direct influence on them. So imagine if I wasn't there.
Yeah, there'd be even less.
I mean,
very little or even none. Like holy shit.
That's me. For the last 6 years down people's throats, literally fucking berating them like you got to train, like them getting their asses. Like I made a video, I'm sure you saw, where one of our coppers got his literal ass beat.
I watched it and I like couldn't even. It was like I was like why?
Cringe,
like dude, it was so cringe. I was like, you're gonna put him in. He like put him in like a crazy like open guard, like closed guards. It's like a closed guard with his legs just like on the floor, like on the ground. And I was like,
lazy
oh my
open
god,
guard,
dude, like what are you doing?
And even after events like
and
that,
he like tried to like jump on his back or something at some point.
Yeah,
and like got flipped over. I'm like, dude, oh my god.
Basic level
and the
fucking
dude was
wrestling.
like way smaller than him too.
Yep.
Like that was.
He had probably 75 pounds on him and half his age.
Yeah.
I mean, basic wrestling would have subdued that human. Basic.
Oh yeah. And
Elementary
he was
school.
on his knees the whole time. Like anytime they were on the ground, he's like, in like almost like the referee position in wrestling, like just like trying to follow him around for a second. And I was like, well, you just knock him over. Like, what are you doing? Like knock him over, get on top of him, pin him. Like, what do you?
And the crazy thing is events like that, oftentimes, like that guy still doesn't train even after that. And the guy was, I don't know if you can tell the video, the suspect was pulling on his gun.
Yeah,
he punched him
like
twice
grabbed,
in the dick and was pulling on his gun.
Yeah.
So it's like, if the boys hadn't shown up, bro.
Yeah, they showed up right in time.
He might be dead.
Oh yeah, and then they like tackled him off of him, and then he's got 3 guys on him then. But yeah, and like crazy that's not an eye-opening experience for you, that you could die any day out there. Like you don't know who you're pulling over or who you're chasing down, what they have. Like, dude, it's like your life isn't literally.
And you would think they would want, just for that reason, they would want to train.
You think?
I think it's yeah. You would think. I think the reasons that cause people not to train are different, right? Like a lot of times you can blame it on, we don't get time to
we don't
train.
have time. Yeah.
We don't get
Bullshit.
paid to train. It's not department approved. Blah blah blah. But it's like, dude, why are you doing, like, I understand the department should train, should pay us to train. It should be on duty. We should get to go to gyms. We should have department training at the department that's specific for law, et cetera, whatever. I get it, but we don't. That's not the world we live in. So do control what you can control, which is going and seeking your own training, especially from someone that's highly qualified who works with him, that being me, who has offered said training and still refuses it. It's like, how do you can't fix that, man. Like, your desire to live and be a good police officer has to extend beyond just what the department offers.
So with you being an EFC instructor, like, is there like a plan to like implement like some sort of instruction or like anything like that? Or is that kind of like the goal with becoming an instructor for EFC?
At the city level? Like
like, are they like, is that kind of the hope to like become an instructor and be like, hey, can I start, setting up classes, or like, how does that work?
I've actually worked on that. I've been working that the last like year, which is, as you would imagine,
Pulling teeth.
a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
It's dude, it makes me want to quit. It like is so frustrating. I'm just I don't want to be around people that are fucking this, either unwilling to adopt it or incapable of understanding how important it is. But yeah, I've been working with the academy on, you got to get through all the red tape. They've been using the same curriculum for decades. The guy in charge is an Aikido follower, so it's just a matter of ego, man.
Yeah.
It's like you got to get past things and people that are just unwilling to change or incapable of changing, because it's like that guy's he's never been in a fight, dude.
Right. It's like, dude, like, why don't they just like pair you guys up and be like, all right, let's see who can control who here.
Because then, the 6'1", 230-pound guy, oh, it's because you're big or athletic. It's like,
no, it's because I've fucking trained for 15 years.
I mean, yes, but that's
probably more than that. I mean,
the scapegoat will always be, oh, because you're fucking athletic, young, big, blah, 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 blah. So it's just, there's always something. You know how it is, man.
Now, are there other, like, is this just a St. Louis thing? Like, are there places around the country that actually implement this, that are better than, like, that do this better than others? Like, is there anything like that?
There are. There are some notable departments that are seeking change, but largely it's shitty. So like Marietta PD actually came out with an analysis of jiu-jitsu trained athletes versus officers versus non-jiu-jitsu trained officers. I think it was like 2019. They conducted a 1 month. It was a very short study. It's not a huge department, but they showed a significant like decrease. I don't have the numbers off my hand, but a significant decrease in use of force and injuries within, those that are trained and those that aren't trained, man. And that's just a cop. And they define someone as being trained as someone who goes to one class a week.
That's it.
I'm like, yeah, that was it. That and they saw change.
Such a minimal. Yeah, I mean that would be an improvement for sure.
Right.
Than what it is. Like 1 day a week is better than no days a week. That's still 52 sessions a year. Like you're going to be a better. At the end of that year, you're going to be better at handling a human body than,
or at least more comfortable.
With it, and
nothing else.
And then like the part that you've mentioned multiple times is like the with jiu-jitsu and wrestling, it's you're going against an actively resisting opponent, and like you get used to that and comfortable in that chaos, and like and obviously being on the street, it's even more dangerous because there's other factors. There's weapons. There's you're not fighting on a mat. Like there's all these things, and like, oh gosh, I can't even. It's crazy to me that there's not more willingness to.
I mean, Grand Rapids is another great example. I think Minnesota, Grand Rapids.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah,
or Michigan.
Michigan. Yeah,
Michigan. Yeah, they adopted EFC curriculum entirely recently, and they're compiling huge analyses on this. And they've seen huge change. We have body-worn camera. EFC is body-worn camera of incidents of where they're actually, you see officers using the methodology directly and it being effective. Like, so, I mean, that's on the street, tested, proven, man. Like, you got guys, like, it's not just like, hey, we're role playing and this is a sparring session. Like, proven, street tested at the highest level methodology. So Grand Rapids is another great example. I mean, there's some, dude, but it ultimately comes down to, like I was saying, it's chain of command. You got these old, just like all things, you get old people, that have been doing it the way they've always been doing it. And it's just change requires new, open-minded people that are usually younger, right? Or at least willing to try something and get beyond the liability. It's like, oh, the thing you always get is, oh, what about injuries? Well, what about fucking death?
Yeah. What about that guy getting his gun taken from him shot right there, and then he's left on the street?
Yeah.
The amount of injuries.
The guy that painting represents. I mean, like, that's, again, that's just sucks.
Easy scapegoats, man. To all whatever it is to just excuse taking responsibility, making a change for the better. Whatever it is, they'll fucking say whatever and do whatever to just avoid it. It's fucking sad, but And the bigger the department, the harder, as you would imagine, like any
Sure.
organization, the harder it's going to be to implement and get that change because you have to go through more fucking bureaucracy.
Yeah. Man,